Welcome back to Journey to Indomitus. I'll be your host, Dana Howell, and today we're going to be painting the glowy Necron blades, as well as a Scorpec Destroyer Lord to go along with it. As we get closer to the end of the year and the end of our Indomitus challenge, we have less and less time to paint the rest of our Necrons and the 15 remaining Sisters of Battle. However, I think I can do it, and I'm excited to make it all work in time. I decided to tackle all of the Necrons first because, let's face it, they're a lot easier, there's fewer colors, and I can get them done faster. And when I was considering how I want to compile this into a video format, I was thinking, well, I could paint every single different figure and talk about that on camera, or I could just take one figure that incorporates all the different techniques I'm going to use on the special characters and focus in on that one figure. So the model that I ended up choosing was the Necron Scorpec Lord, because he incorporates pretty much all the different techniques we would want to use on pretty much all of the special characters in this box set. So without further ado, let's jump right in and get this thing painted. We're going to start by priming in gloss black like we've done for all of our other Necrons. And then we're going to spray our model from the left side, from our left-hand side, and slightly underneath with a Vallejo shifter's color called Violet Old Copper. This is going to give this side of the model a slightly pinkish purple tone. And then on the right-hand side, we're going to spray from slightly above to cover all the areas we didn't hit with the color we just sprayed. And for this, we're going to use a second shifter's color, Turquoise Violet. Using a two-tone of these colors is going to give us a nice oil slick look, incorporating a good amount of different colors, and yeah, it looks good. It looks like this. Then, because this is such a large model and we want to add some variety to some of the large surfaces, we're going to use a third shifter's paint just to add some little splotches of color to these wide open areas. And the color I've chosen is Pearl Violet, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's sort of a violet color with a slightly pearlescent sheen to it. We're just going to add some little spritzes of this color to the wide open areas to add some flavor. Once this is done, we can put away our airbrush for a second and we can start in on the copper parts of the model. Much like our Necron warriors, the copper parts of this model are going to be the inner skeleton, the upper shoulder plates, and then we're just going to pick out a few other parts that we think should be copper. Don't worry about being too clean or precise with your copper application, and if you get some on different parts of the model, you can just call it paint chipping, because after all, this is a fallen royal robot from space. So you would expect there'd be a little bit of chipping. Speaking of faded royalty, I wanted to reflect the fact that this Necron is a fallen royal noble somehow on the model, and what better way to do that than jewelry? I wanted to take a few of the plates on the Necron and sort of imply that these are remnants of the faded glory of this ancient lord's former past. So we picked the collar, which kind of looks like a little ornate necklace, and the whatever that thing is, the flap, the ornate flap thing, which serves no purpose. It must be a piece of jewelry, right? The color I've chosen to use here is another shifter's color, light violet green, but you could use any sort of faded gold tin color for this process. Once all of our metallics are dry, we can go ahead and add some washes to the model. Here I'm going to use one of my favorite washes for this sort of thing, which is a 50-50 mix of Agrax Earthshade and Liquitex Transparent Raw Umber ink. Using a relatively large brush, we're just going to slop this onto all of the light violet green and copper parts of the model. It's going to give us a lot of really nice instant shading and allow it to have more of a metallic look. And remember, this is a Destroyer Lord. It's a very messy kind of creature, so it's okay if you get some of this wash on some of the other parts of the model. In fact, you can see here, I'm just slopping a little bit of it onto the legs and around the base of the figure to reflect that this is one of the more messy Necrons, so feel free to put some wherever you want. Now that we're done with our washes, we can move on to some of the fun parts of the figure, the parts that I know that you're watching this tutorial for, the glowy bits of the model. So we're going to use our airbrush to spray all of the big blades and the little tubes at the top in our titanium white ink. You could do this with a brush. I'm just using an airbrush here to save a little bit of time. Then I'm going to use my brush to apply the same white ink into all the little crevices of the figure that we want to glow. Once again, I used Liquitex white ink for this part, but you could use any sort of white paint that you want. It doesn't really matter. For the next step, we're going to apply our neon glow color, and you can use your neon glow color of choice. Any fluorescent ink or paint would do fine here, such as Curios hair ink like we used in our last Necron video. But today, because we're all out of Curios hair ink, we're just going to use a little bit of Dalerani processed magenta. I'm going to be using an airbrush for this step, but you could just as easily take your time and glaze this on by hand. If you want more details about how you can do smooth blends like this by hand, go and check out my video on glazing right up here. For the blade, you can see I'm basically just going to be following the patterning of the key art. There's a bit of darkness near the top, near the middle, and at the bottom, just sort of following that kind of pattern. They already figured out what would look good for us in the key art, so we're just going to go ahead and follow that. And all we're doing here is just applying light coats to sort of get that sort of patterning. For the rest of the glowy parts, we're just going to be applying our magenta ink in a sort of pattern around the most glowy part. So the center of the glow should be almost white, and then it should be surrounded by a layer of magenta in order to sort of read as having that neon glow. At this point, we can also glaze on some of this ink onto the base around where the blade is to make it look like it's kind of glowing, and also to give some variety to the base itself. And if you're painting a large army, you could probably stop this process right here and call this done, but we're going to take this just a little bit farther with a few finishing steps. Using Druki Eye Violet or violet ink of your choice, we're just going to shade in the recesses of the blade to give it more the look like it has in the key art of being several segmented pieces of whatever these blades are made of. We can also use this violet ink to shade any of the parts that we may have gone a little bit too hard with the magenta ink at our airbrush step, adding a little bit more definition to those places where the ink is a little bit too strong. And also, if we want to at this point, we can use our violet ink to shade some of the base, bringing out some of the details on the base that we made for this figure. Once we're done with our washes, we can use a dry white paint and do some panel lining on the blade. We're just wiping off the majority of our paint on a paper towel and using just the side of our brush to do some little edge highlighting on the side of our blade and any other places we might want that edge highlight. We can also mix this paint with a little bit of glaze medium and use this same paint to add a little bit of a central glow to any of the parts that we want to really read as being a bright neon glow, adding that little highlight in the middle. For this next step, I wanted to somehow show that these Necrons are part of the Destroyer cult, and I wanted to visually reflect that somehow, because both in the lore and on the tabletop, they play and act differently than regular Necrons. So we're just going to give them a little bit of an orange tone to some of their eyes and the rib cages using just a little spot of Cassandra yellow wash. This is going to give us a little bit of a transition from that pink to sort of an orange tone on some of these places on the model. I'm just using this very sparingly in certain places to give a little bit more of a angry orange-red tone to the model rather than the more lively pink neon look, if that makes sense. After that, I thought it might be fun to add a little bit of turquoise to the model just to add a little bit of interest like we did on the Necron Warrior models. So here you can see I'm stippling on a little bit of a turquoise color to the flappy thing to make it look like verdigris or some sort of detail. I'm also adding this to some of the bottom of the legs and to the base to just add a little bit of contrast to the pinks and oranges. As a final step, I thought the metal was just looking a little bit too clean, so I wanted to add some pure silver highlights to some of the copper. I'm just using metal color dull aluminum for this, but you could use any silver color. And I'm just edge highlighting some of the copper parts and just adding a little bit of speckling to the whole figure to reflect, I know Necrons aren't painted, but it kind of looks like a chipped paint, to just give this figure a little bit more of a rough and tumble look, and again visually make these a little bit distinct from the regular Necrons. Once you're done adding as many details as you like, we can rim the base with a matte black paint of your choice, and the figure is done. This will be my last Necron tutorial before the end of the year. But as I said at the beginning of this video, I'm just going to be using these same techniques to finish up all the special characters, and you will get to see them before the end of the year, if I make the challenge deadline. For those of you who haven't seen the other videos, the Indomitus challenge is a challenge that I made to myself to finish the entire contents of the Indomitus box and the Sisters of Battles special edition box before the end of the year, and I currently just have a few figures left to go. However, if you would like to see how I apply these techniques in specific ways to the other Necrons, you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at Dana_Howell. I'm sure I'll be posting pictures of them up there as I progress through the Necrons. Before we go, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to our patrons on Patreon. As always, thank you so much for supporting these videos. I couldn't be doing it without you. If you'd like to see your name up here or get access to bonus content, you can subscribe at patreon.com/DanaHowell. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.